Hi all, I hope you all are doing great. I welcome you all to the brand new series of React Redux. In this series, I will be teaching you complete concept on Redux, and also we are going to make one project in that we are going to apply all the theoretical knowledge whatever we have learned in this series, and we will be making one complete Redux project, so that once the concepts are clear, you can make any project in Redux. Before starting the series, let me just clear this out. If you are a complete beginner to Redux, and if you are having zero knowledge on Redux, and also parallelly you are not aware of React, then learning Redux will be confusing. You are going to mess up with the concepts and you will not understand anything in Redux. So I assume that people who are watching this Redux series will be aware of React. Okay, you should be having a basic understanding on React. That is, you should be knowing fundamentals on React. Okay, if you are not clear with React fundamentals, then understanding Redux will be confusing and you are just going to mess up with the concepts. So what I suggest you is just go through the React fundamentals. For that, I have already uploaded complete series on React. You can go through that React series on my channel and you can just learn fundamentals of React. That is basic knowledge. What is export, import, what are state containers. You can just get the basic fundamental on React, how we use components inside app, how we import those components, why we have to export that. You just have to know the basic of React, then you can watch this Redux series, and that time you will be very much clear with this Redux concept. But parallelly, if you are learning both React and Redux, then you will be confusing yourself, and at the end you will not be learning either React and also you are not going to learn Redux. You are just going to confuse yourself. Both you will not be able to learn. So first learn fundamentals of React, then come to this video and you can continue from here. So the name you can see, it is React Redux. But before understanding about React Redux, that I will be telling you in later sessions, let's understand what is Redux. Okay, this is the main motive of this series. We should completely understand about Redux. So first let's understand what is Redux. Redux is nothing but it is a predictable state container for JavaScript apps. Later on in this series, in this section itself, you will completely understand about this definition. Here you can see Redux is an open source JavaScript library. It is a JavaScript library. So previously if you thought Redux can only be used with React, it is not. Redux is a JavaScript library. So it can be used with Angular, it can be used with Vue.js, but most of the time Redux is used with React. So it is called as React Redux. So people get confused. It is only used with React. No, it is not. It is completely independent. Even without using React, we can use Redux. So it is nothing but it is an open source JavaScript library used to manage our application state. Now in these two slides, you have seen so many new words. Predictable, you have seen state container, you have seen this application state, that we are going to see one by one. As of now, just understand what is Redux. It is an open source JavaScript library and also it is used to manage application state. Okay, I will be telling you what is application state. React uses Redux for building the user interface. Now, when it comes to user interface, it is a UI. Okay, it is for front end. So basically, Redux is also used for front end development. And it was first introduced by Dan Abramov. This is the person, and Andrew Clerk in 2015. In 2015, Redux was introduced. So what we have seen till now, Redux is a predictable state container for JavaScript apps, and it is nothing but it is a JavaScript library, and it is used to manage our application state. And Redux was introduced by Dan Abramoff and Andrea Clerk. We have seen this definition. Redux is a predictable state container for JavaScript apps. In this definition, we are having three things. We have predictable, we have state container, and we have JavaScript apps. Now, one by one, we are going to understand this. Once you understood about these three things, 30% you will be aware of Redux. You will get to know what actually Redux is doing. So one by one we are going to see for JavaScript apps, it is predictable and it is state container. So now for JavaScript app, as I told you, it is a library for JS application. So you should not get confused. It is only used with React. It can be used independently. It can be used separately. It can also be used with Angular, and also we can use with Vue.js. You can see it is not dependent on React. It is completely independent of React, and it can be used separately. You should never get confused. Redux can only work with React. No, it is not. We can use in JS application, which means I can create simple JS file, and there also I can use this Redux. Now state container. If you are aware of React, then you will be having a understanding on the state. But in Redux, what it will be doing, here we are having one container, and inside that container, all the application state, let me show you. It stores the state of our application, and state is a design pattern used to represent state of an object. Okay, don't get confused with this definition. I will be showing you an example. Now inside React, each and every component will be broken. I will be having separate component for navbar, separate component for header, for footer, for sidebar. For each and everything, I will be having separate components. Now in React, suppose just imagine in this component, this is called a student component. And inside this component, I am having one login form for student, and whatever data you can see, roll number, this first name, last name, standard, and logged in through. This is the entire information. This is nothing but this information. This is my application information. Okay, this information will be stored inside one container. In Redux, that container is called as a store, and this information will be managed by Redux. So this is nothing but state of an application. Whatever application information we are having, that will be stored inside the container, and in Redux we can manage that information. We can check if the student is logged in or not. We can check if the form is clicked or not. Some basic things we can check, and also we can manage that state. Now inside my state, I am having all this information. Now as soon as I click on OK without filling any form, if I just click on login, it will not be logged in. So the state will be changed to false here. This is how Redux will be managing the state. State of an application is nothing but our application data. Whatever data we want that to manage, we will be storing inside that container, and accordingly, based on the clicks or based on the actions, whatever it is performed, we will be updating the state, and also we will be managing the state. Now inside this simple student component, this will be my state, and inside that we will have all this information: roll number, first name, last name, standard, and also logged in through. Now if I just want to display multiple students, then my state will be array of users. You can see if we want to display multiple students, then state of a component will be an object that contains an array of students. Okay, you should always remember our state is nothing but it is an object, and if I want multiple students, then it will be containing array of students. And here you can see Redux will store and manage the application state. First it will be storing, then according to our actions that state will be managed. But it is not easy to update the state by using actions, by using reducers that we are going to see. Those are the most important concepts on Redux, and Redux will be revolving around that. So once you understand how the state will be updated using actions, using reducers, then you will be having more clear understanding about state. Okay, just as of now, just remember state of an application is nothing but whatever information we are having inside our front end app, we are just storing inside that state. But don't think state is a database which will be holding our data. As I told you, Redux is a JavaScript library and it is used for front end. So it will not be acting as a backend. It will be treated as a front end library. Never get confused state with database. Okay, it is just like it is holding our data, application data. Now next is predictable. Now predictable in the sense state can only be updated in predictable fashion, and state of an application can be changed but not very easily. For that we have to perform some actions, and whatever changes we do we will get to know about that changes. So it is called as predictable. Now state can only be updated in predictable fashion. I will just show you this example. Now imagine you have ordered something in Amazon and you have already ordered, you have made the payment. Now we just want to see the delivery status of that. So we will be getting item is packed, item is on the way, and also delivery is completed. Okay, these are the statuses we are already aware of. In this state, first I will be getting item packed that will be stored inside my state. Then as soon as it gets updated, item on the way will be updated inside the state. Then delivery completed will be updated inside the state. Okay, we will be performing some actions. Based on that, this will be updated inside the state. But we already know when we order something, these are some of the things which we are already aware of. Okay, we will be getting all the statuses. So we can predict the status, what will happen next. Now, as soon as I get item is packed, now definitely the next status will be item is on the way. We can predict that one. So these are predictable. So that is why Redux is a predictable state container for JavaScript apps. Whatever changes that is happening on state container, that is predictable. So we call it as a predictable. Okay, I hope you understood all these things. Predictable, state container, and JavaScript apps. Okay, these three things you should be very aware of, and you should understand this Redux definition. And in Redux, all the state transitions are explicit and it is easily possible to keep track of them. As I told you, we can easily keep track of each and every status. Because we are able to keep track of those changes, this application state becomes predictable. We can easily predict the next status. So that is why our state, whatever changes we are doing inside that state container, those are predictable. We can imagine that. Now, if the user is logged in, state will be updated to true. If the user is not logged in, state will remains false. If the user has filled all the data, but some data he is missing, and when he clicks on login, user will not be able to log in. So state remains the same. It will remains false. So this is why it is called as predictable state container. We can predict that one. Now you will be having a question, why we need Redux? Before 2015 also, when Redux was not introduced, we were using React. We were creating complete dynamic websites. We were doing all the stuffs even without Redux. Okay, before also we were using websites without the use of Redux. Now, why should we use Redux? Okay, I will be showing you this example. Now, here I am having one diagram. As I already told you, inside React, each and everything will be divided into components. For navbar separate component, header separate component, footer separate component, images separate component. For each and everything, we will be having separate components. So just imagine this is my hierarchy of component. This is my app component, main component. And inside that, I am having two components, A and B. Let me just take one. Inside this, I am having A and I am having B component. Then again inside A, I am having child 1 and I am having child 2. Then inside B, I am having child 3. Now just think, all my complete data is stored. Now here we do not have, in this example, I am not taking any state, I am not taking any container. My data is not stored inside any container. It is stored inside this child 3 component. My main data is present inside this child 3 component. Now what I want in future, if I just want data inside component A, from child 3 to component A, then from child 3 to component B, it is not possible in React, because the data in React always flows from parent to child. Suppose if I was having data inside this component B, then I can easily pass this data here. I can pass this data here. But from child 3 to B, I cannot pass this data. From B to from C also I cannot pass this data, because parent should be holding the data. Child to parent is A. So first data will be passed inside this app. Then it will be passed here as a prop. Then again it will be passed here as a prop. So the data flows only from parent to child component, which makes it unidirection. Only one way the data can be flowed, that is from parent to child. But from child to parent, it is not possible. Okay, it is not possible at all. We cannot send data from child to parent component in React. Okay, it is not at all possible. I will be showing you more complex example. Okay, imagine this is my component hierarchy. Here we are having multiple components. You can see this is the main component app, and here we are having multiple components. Inside app we are having component C, component D. All these components are present inside one of my React project. Now my data is present inside this component A. Okay, inside the last child. Now suppose in future I want the data to B, component B, I want this data. I cannot get directly. Siblings also I cannot pass the data. Only from parent I can get the data. Now my data is residing inside A, but I want data inside B. Okay, I want the data inside B. Now what I will be doing, I will be leveling up. I have to change the entire code and I have to pass the data to their parent, and their parent is 1. Okay, you can see 1 is attached to this A and B. So 1 is the parent of A and B. So if B wants the data, first I should be updating my code. I should store the data inside 1. So once the parent gets the data, then as a prop, I can send data to both A and B. Okay, this seems simple. Only we just have to change little bit of code and we can send the data using props. Now my requirement has changed. Now my two component wants the data. Now my one is having the data now, but my two wants data now. Okay, because my requirement has changed now. Now again what I have to do, I have to repeat the same process. Again I have to update the code. I have to send the data, not send. I just have to keep the data inside this A component. Okay, I have to keep the data inside this A component. Then again as a prop, the data will be sent to component 1 and component 2. Okay, two levels. Okay, we can do. We just have to change some things. Okay, it is good. But you can see in this React component, in this React project, there are multiple components. This is just an example. But imagine if you are making complex projects and if you want to send the data from one component to another, if you want to communicate from one component to another, it is not possible. My component 1 cannot communicate with component 2. So that is the reason we are not able to pass the data. I have to pass the data inside component A and then as a prop, the data will be sent. Now again my requirement has changed. Now this B component wants the data. Now again what I should be doing? Again I should level up. I should store the data inside their parent and their parent is 6. So again the data should be stored here. Once the data is stored inside this component 6, then I can send data to component A and component B because component 6 is the parent. So I can send the data here. Now what happens? My requirement is getting changed and changed and changed. Again, I want data inside this 5. So again, what I will be doing? Again, I have to level up. I have to store the data inside this component C. Again, as a prop, I have to send to 5 and 6. Again, my requirement changed. Again, I want the data inside this D component. Again, I have to level up. I have to store the data inside this app. Then as a prop, I have to send the data to C and D. You can see as the complexity of the program increases, the complexity of the code will also increase in React. Okay, this is what we were doing, but there are few solutions for this that we are going to discuss. Okay, these things we understood what we were doing. We were leveling up and we were storing the data. We were getting the data using props. But now what I want data inside this F component. You can see my F component is here, but as of now, my actual data is residing inside this app component, but I want data inside this F component. So this is where now what will happen? As a prop, I have to send to C. As I told you, the data can be flowed only from parent to child. So F parent is 4. Okay, component 4. First, I have to send data to C as a prop. Then again, I have to send from C to 6 as a prop. Then again, I have to send from 6 to B as a prop. Then from B to 4 as a prop. Then finally from 4 to F as a prop. You can see it seems so difficult, and when the complexity of the program increases, this code will also become very, very difficult and very complex. But again, if the requirement change, sending the data to main component, getting the data from there will be very confusing and also time consuming. So as a prop, we have to keep on passing. Now you can see the problem here. This component does not need any data. Okay, this is only the parent component of F. But this component does not want any data that we are getting from app. But still, component 4 is getting the data. But you can see as we were having the data inside this last component, inside this component A, by keep on changing the requirement, directly we have come to app component. And again, if we want the data inside this F component, so we have to do all the propping and everything. And this is very complex. So this problem was solved in React itself by using prop drilling. In prop drilling, what happens? Our main data will be stored inside the app component. Whatever data we are having, it will directly be stored inside the main component, that is the parent component. Now, whichever component wants the data directly from app, they cannot get, but the data should be sent as a prop. You can see, suppose I want data inside component 1. Okay, I want data inside component 1, but their parent is A. So first what app will do, it will send the data to component A. Then from component A as a prop, I will be getting the data in component 1. But in our previous example, what we have seen, okay, this was our example. And in that what we have seen, the data was stored inside this component A. Okay, at the last level child, I was having the data inside this, I was having the data. So I should do all this leveling up and propping and sending the data here and there. So this was very confusing. But in prop dealing, what we have done, we have directly stored the data inside the app component. Now, if I want data inside 2, then again I have to do the same thing, component A, then I just have to send to component 2. But here also the problem is component A does not want any data, but still it should be aware of those data. Whatever data we are having and whatever component 2 requires the data, this component A should also be aware of that data. So this is also like, this is not used very much. So here also there is a problem. Components which do not need data, they should also be aware of those data, and data will be sent using props. Okay, props is a concept of React. In this series also we will understand about props, because props play a very, very important role. Okay, so that problem was solved using context API and use context. This is also a concept of React. Now inside this, what we will be doing, we will be storing the data inside the app component, but we will be wrapping everything using one thing, that is provider. We will be wrapping the main component using one wrapper, that is provider. Now whichever component wants the data, they will be acting as a consumer. Once they act as a consumer, they can directly get the data from app component. They can directly get the data from app component. Now again, via they don't have to travel. From component A, they don't have to travel. Directly from app component, they can get the data. Now suppose here I am having one more component, component B. And for component B, I am having 3 components, 1, 2, and 3. Now my this component wants data, so directly it can act as a consumer and it can get the data from the app. And there is always a debate going on between Redux and Context API. I will be telling you about Redux as well, so that you will be having a clear understanding and you can compare yourself. So which is best among Context API and Redux? There is no, honestly speaking, there is no answer for that. Before that, let me just show you about Redux. Okay, prop drilling was solved by Context API and use context. Now this is our previous example only. We are having all these components, but in Redux, what we will be doing, we will be creating a separate store. Okay, this is a separate store. Now which, and inside this all the data will be stored. Now whichever component wants the data, they can directly communicate with this store. You can see they are directly communicating with this store. They are directly calling this store and they are getting the data. So this is about Redux, and inside Context API, what we will do, we will wrap our entire app component as a provider. Whichever component wants the data, they will be acting as a consumer and they will be getting the data. But in Redux, we will be creating a separate store and storing all the data inside this one. and whichever component wants the data, they will be directly communicating with store and they will be getting the data. So this is what I told. There is no good or bad answer for which is best among context API and Redux. Context API also, I loved it very much. Redux also, I loved it very much. But it depends on the personal experience, how you use both of them. You can learn both wherever you require. You can take the necessary actions and you can use the necessary concept. But if you want to choose any one among this context API and Redux, first you should learn both context API and Redux. You yourself should understand which is best among those cells in which you are comfortable. You can take that as your practice and you can learn more about that. But personally, most of the times in every project I use Redux. Sometimes, whenever it is necessary, I use context API as well. It is not like I completely ignore context API. I actually like that concept as well. So, I will use both according to my actions, according to my project, according to the requirement. I will be using this concept. Just practice yourself, understand yourself, and choose by yourself. Now, many will be having many questions, so I will not be answering all, but I will be answering few of the questions. So, that is why we need Redux in React. In our example, we have already seen to reduce the complexity, we are storing the data inside one store, and from that store, we can get the data to any component. And you can see Redux allows you to manage your app state in a single place and keeps changes in your app in more predictable and in traceable way. So that is the reason people prefer to use Redux. Now, should Redux be added to React applications? As I told you, if we are having complex project and if we are having multiple components nested multiple times, so that time Redux can be used with React, not not only in complex project, but if you are having 5 or 6 components, that time also you can use Redux with React. Okay, every time if you are having only 1 or 2 components, there is no need of using Redux in React. But if you are having multiple components and if you feel the data should be transferred to many components at one stage, that time you can use Redux. So here also I have mentioned the same thing, not necessary, but we should use Redux in React when we have number of components that need to share the state, but it is not a fixed rule. Okay, accordingly, whichever concept you want to use, you can use. You can use context API as well. So for complex applications, we will find hard to manage the state of an application. So that is the reason we use Redux. And can we learn Redux along with React? It is a confirm no, because learning React and Redux parallelly, you are going to confuse yourself. You are going to mess up with the concept. At the starting itself, I told the prerequisite of Redux is React. You should be knowing the basic concepts on React to get started with Redux. So never learn parallelly both things. First learn React, then you can jump to Redux. So which is best, Redux or use context? Previously, as I mentioned, there is no good or bad answer for this one. People choose which is best for themselves. Okay, it is not like based on my opinion, you should use Redux. Based on their opinion, you should use context API. It should be your choice. Okay, you have to practice both, but whichever you feel that is making you comfortable, that is making your life easy, you have to choose that concept. If they are having 10 people, 10 people will be having different point of views, so we don't have to listen to each point of view. We should just focus on our point of view. What is our point of view on that concept? Accordingly, we can choose. You can choose either Redux or you can choose either Context API. Is Redux a backend? It is a JavaScript library, so it is used on the front end of a web application. You should not think Redux as a database. It is basically a library for JavaScript and it is mostly used in front end part. So is Redux is a programming language? Here in previous question, as I mentioned, it is a library. So it is not any programming language. Programming language, what we call, we have JavaScript is a programming language. Java is a programming language. They are having their own libraries and their own frameworks. But Redux itself is a library. So it is not a programming language. Redux is an open source JavaScript library for managing and centralizing application state. Centralizing application state in the sense we are just going to create one store and inside that store all the application state data will be stored. And it is most commonly used with libraries such as React or Angular or Vue for building user interfaces. Now, what is the difference between React and Redux? As I told you, these both can be used separately. So, what is the difference between them? Redux is used to manage the state and state transformations, and Redux is often used with React. But React has its own concept of state. So, you should know fundamentals of React, then you will be having the difference between React and Redux. React will be having its own concept of state, but Redux manages the state. Now, is it true that Redux is only compatible with React? No. Redux can be used with Angular, it can be used with Vue.js, but mostly it is used with React. So people get confused, it is only used with React. No, it can be used with many frameworks. Redux is not only compatible with React, it can also be used with Angular and Vue.js, and also it can be used separately as well. So this is all about Redux. I hope you got the basic understanding of Redux. Once your basic is good, then we can get started with Redux and explore more concepts on Redux.